A few weeks ago, Sue and I went to an estate sale and I bought up a huge lot of roosters. In today's video, I'm going to make over these roosters, but believe me when I say this is just a small sample of what I bought. Some of these roosters might have been fine reselling on their own, but I decided that I really wanted to make them over. I'm going to be using DIY paint in the color Vintage Linen. And after only a couple of strokes with my typical Klingon S30, I decided I really needed the pointed sash. It has a pointed tip and is much easier to get in on these nooks and crannies. And on these teeny tiny little roosters, I went with an even smaller brush. It is sometimes easier just to get an appropriate size brush and wash them at the end rather than using a brush that is too large or too small for your projects. Up close, you can see just how rich and creamy this paint is, and the coverage after only one coat is amazing. And while DIY paint adheres very well to glass and shiny surfaces, I decided I would use a little bit of our sea salt. This is basically Dixie Belle's salt wash, and mix it up with some of the Vintage Linen for the ultra shiny piece. Now, I did accidentally add a little too much, so I'm going to thin it out a little more with some additional paint. In the end, I actually used way too much and ended up just using it much thicker than I wanted. Unfortunately, this left some wasted product, but it is what it is. I let it be a little too thick in order to stop the waste, basically, but it still worked out just fine. Really, you want this product to be the consistency of frosting. And because this is so thick and I really just wanted to kind of dab it on, I decided to use one of my small stencil brushes, and that made putting this on really easy without it being too bumpy and lumpy. Now, you might have noticed that I haven't posted in a while. Well, that's because I've been busy with Creative Con here in Jacksonville. I'm also in the process of making over our booth at Great American, and there is a lot to talk about in those. I'm not going to get to much of those today, but be looking for those in upcoming videos. I'm really excited to tell you about both things. I think you'll really enjoy what's coming as well. Right, so back to the roosters. I have everything painted in 2 total coats of DIY Paints Vintage Linen, and in my opinion, they are already looking better. With those completely dry, I am going to use some of DIY Paint's Salty Kiss to add some detail around the base. For this, I'm using a very small brush, and I'm basically painting over what was green when they were in their original form. If you are a regular viewer to my channel, you may notice that this is very similar to the rooster that I painted when I made over the JRV roaster. I sit and stare at that rooster in my living room every single day, and I think just how adorable he is, and I decided I need to make more. The next step is going to be wet distressing. So I've got a clean cotton rag, in this case a torn up old t-shirt that is damp from a water bottle mister, and I am just going along and wiping off some of the top layer of paint. You may notice it does take a little bit of effort because the DIY paint adheres really well. Now on these teeny tiny ones, I did decide to dry brush just a little bit of green after I started wiping the paint off because it just was a little flat. So I added a little bit of dry brush on the base, and then I am going to go ahead and wet distress it back. This will just give it a little bit of a green hue. I don't want it to be a huge amount of green, just a simple touch. I should probably also mention that I decided to only use 1 coat of the green, the Salty Kiss, because I am going to be wiping back and wet distressing this area as well. Using the same wet distress technique that I used on the white with the smaller birds, I am now going to do the same thing to remove a lot of the paint off of the red comb areas. And then once the green is completely dry, I will be doing that to the green areas as well. Remember, this is about creating a vintage soft look. It is not about removing 100% of it. So the rooster that I added the sea spray to, It didn't really have the ability to have the red under it as well. So I decided to go ahead and add some DIY Carnival red and create a little bit more of a rough area of where the comb would be, and that's just going to blend it better into the other roosters that I have. But of course, because now the red is very bright, I'm going to go back over that red with a little bit of vintage linen. I probably should have let the red dry a little bit more. DIY paint does reactivate when it's wet, so it was always going to turn a little bit pink unless I put a seal level between them using a top coat or wax or something. And yes, this area will need to get wiped back as well using the same technique that we did before. This time, because we've got such a red pigmented color, I'm gonna do my best not to get that pink, if you will, all over my nice white rooster. It's ironic that this was the most challenging of all of my roosters because it's probably the one that I most could have sold without repainting it. But I gotta say, I still love the way he came out. When wet distressing the green, you need to make the same precautions that you did with the red, in that the green will get all over your bird. So do your best to keep getting a clean area of that wet cloth and pulling it off the bird and not onto it. You don't want a green rooster. And once again, because DIY paint reactivates when it's wet, I have decided I'm going to use a spray matte sealant on this. This is my favorite, and I am just going to put them on a turntable and spray them up really well. Also, this will allow them to be used outside, or in our case, Florida humidity can get to them. Ultimately, I didn't want to take a chance that I would either wax this or use a top coat and smear the green or the red into my very white bird. And here is a peek back at where we started. You can see lots and lots of color. I went ahead and painted them all to a beautiful neutral white with DIY paint, vintage linen, taking some inspiration off of this little set that I did not have to repaint. I love how everything balanced out in the collection, and I would love to hear your opinion. Do you like them bright and red and colorful, or do you like them kind of in this more muted farmhouse look? Leave a note in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up, like, and subscribe. See you next Monday.